The day. I'm joined now by a team of reporters once again, Peter Alexander at the White House. But first, I want to turn to Shaq Brewster, who's on the phone with us. He is in Chicago right now. Shaq, if earlier today we heard from the president saying that he wanted J.B. Pritzker to call him, the governor saying he would not do that. And frankly, he sounds as defiant as ever.
No, that's exactly right, Gabe. And right before you listened to Governor Pritzker just there, by the way, I'm standing right outside of the press conference, so hoping to get a question with him once these remarks are over. But right before you started playing that sound from him, he came up and said, first, I want to address the president's what he called unhinged remarks moments ago. And he said, no, I will not call the president. He later said that I refuse to play reality game show with Donald Trump. This is Illinois' governor really leaning into this moment and both kind of giving Chicagoans a warning about what's to come, what he is hearing. He said that this has been a tough week and a half for folks in this city and really listing what we can expect to see here in Chicago over the next couple of days. But I think the second piece of it is he's speaking almost to a national audience as well, talking to other governors, asking that they do not participate in this federalization to come of National Guard troops, and also signaling that Chicagoans and folks here will fight back in the courtroom. And I had a one-on-one interview with the governor last week, almost exactly a week ago, and one of the questions we asked was there anything he could do to stop this from happening? And he was very clear-eyed in that there was nothing he can do to stop the president from taking this action. But he said that lawsuits are certainly possible, and that is something that we can expect to see. Whether or not that happens before or after any action or movement from the federal government, that's an open question. But he also made clear a lot of this is about shaming. He said he wanted to slow the president down, almost to shame the president from taking any of these actions. And I think that is what you're seeing in a lot of these comments that you're hearing from the governor and from the mayor of Chicago. Yesterday, we saw a big protest throughout the city. I think they're doing what they can to say they're going to push back, but also trying to see if they can get ahead of any federal involvement.
And Shaq, briefly, because I know you got to get it back in that room, the president continued to make these claims on social media earlier today that Chicago is very dangerous. He called it the murder capital of the world, the most dangerous city in America. Now, there was significant violence in Chicago over the weekend, but can you give us a fact check on those claims? There's some context here.
Absolutely. And, the Chicago Tribune did a deep dive of this question just this week. And when you look at major cities with homicide, in terms of homicide rates, Chicago ranks 7th amongst major American cities. When you look at that rate, that's below cities like St. Louis, Baltimore, and New Orleans. When you look at FBI statistics, you see Chicago even further down when you look at that homicide rate. Now, I think one important thing here, Gabe, and, as a resident of Chicago, as when you talk to people, when you listen to officials, everyone wants crime to go down even further. It's been trending downward. They want to see that to continue to go down. Everyone wants those shootings that you see. We just had a violent weekend here in Chicago. They want to see the shooting stop. The distinction here, and that you're hearing from local leaders, is that they don't believe having National Guard troops, which are limited in what they can do. They're usually standing outside of federal buildings or going out with federal personnel on immigration raids. They don't believe that's going to stop the shootings that you're seeing largely on the west and south side of Chicago. So that's why you heard the governor even today say, hey, we will take more FBI, more ATF agents, more federal agents who have law enforcement powers. They will take that, but there's not a belief that having federalized troops standing outside of federal buildings, that will really get to the root of the problem here in Chicago or other cities around the country, Gabe.
Shaq Brewster on the phone for us in Chicago. Shaq, I'm going to let you go so you can get back into that news conference. I'm joined now, though, by some of our other reporters here, Reilly, our justice reporter, and also Courtney Kube, our Pentagon correspondent. Courtney, remind people what the Posse Comitatus Act is and what exactly it does. What does it define what is considered domestic law enforcement here?
Yeah, it's not something that really people are talking about every single night at the dinner table, Gabe. It's been a law for hundreds of years now, several hundred years now. And essentially what it says is that active duty members of the U.S. military are not allowed to engage in law enforcement here in the United States, so no domestic law enforcement. And the key here is this federal judge today, this federal court, said what the U.S. military was doing in Los Angeles and specifically noted members of the U.S. military who had their identities obscured in some cases using military vehicles were conducting things that were close enough to law enforcement that it was a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. He specifically, this is Judge Charles Breyer, he specifically said that the U.S. military cannot engage in things like searches, seizures, arrests, and things like that. Now, what's really key here, as you were talking to Shaq there about the possibility of more federal law enforcement deployments in Chicago, is that this judge put a 10-day hold before this actually goes into act. Gabe, everyone expects the Trump administration will appeal it. So the big question here is, will that appeal go through, and will this actually go into effect on September 12th or not?
And Courtney, Kube, I want to turn on to Ryan Reilly. That was part of the question I wanted to ask you, Ryan, but I also wanted to ask you more about this ruling. Is there any penalty attached to this ruling?
I mean, not for now. Like Courtney said, that 10-day period is really going to give them a chance to sort of run that up to the Supreme Court. But it really does speak to how sort of unprecedented this moment is, because certainly during actual security emergencies, right, you can invoke the Insurrection Act, right? You know, like that's why we saw troops respond to the Capitol on January 6th. And when there's a true emergency, that is a power that they have. But this is essentially just sending them, you know, in D.C.'s case, they've been picking up garbage and standing by Union Station down the block here, just sort of standing around oftentimes. So it really is an unusual use of the military to enforce domestic law. Is what the judge laid out here is that it's unlawful and that they should not be continuing with that practice. Yeah, and
reporters asked Stephen Miller, the White House Deputy Chief of Staff, last week if he was considering, or the administration was considering, bringing in the Insurrection Act or imposing the Insurrection Act in this case, and he wouldn't commit to that. Peter Alexander, I want to turn to you, the president, and get some of your reaction to something else the president said today. We got his first response, at least on camera, to the Federal Appeals Court ruling on Friday regarding tariffs. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, well, we wait to see what's going to happen next with that. Obviously, the president vowed an appeal. He said he wants this before the Supreme Court. He called for an expedited ruling from the court after that decision from a lower court that came late last week, in effect saying that most of the tariffs that the president has sort of unilaterally put in place now are illegal. If I can, Gabe, I want to circle back to the conversation as we listen to the president right now, the back and forth with J.B. Pritzker. One thing that struck me in particular from his remarks were him saying the terror and cruelty is the point, not the safety of anyone living here. I think you're seeing a very unique sort of line that J.B. Pritzker is a potential 2028 candidate, certainly someone who has found a different niche as it is in his effort to push back on Donald Trump, is trying to lead the Democratic effort against this, recognizing, as we've been discussing here, that Americans broadly want their streets, their communities to be more safe. But as Pritzker has communicated, they don't believe this is the way to go about it. The president today was particularly kind in his praise of Muriel Bowser, the Democratic mayor of Washington, D.C., saying that she has been grateful publicly for troops helping bring down the crime rate. But she has also made clear that this is not the most efficient way, not the best way to go about it, and that ultimately it has caused some backlash that she wishes didn't exist. So I think what we're watching right now is a very interesting back and forth between a Democratic governor trying to find the best sort of pushback on President Donald Trump, who really on the topic of immigration feels like he has had the competitive advantage so far.
Peter, that's a great point, and certainly Mayor Bowser here in D.C. not considered a likely presidential candidate in 2028. Courtney, I want to go back to you on one point that President Trump also told reporters a short time ago in the Oval Office that the U.S. conducted a strike on a ship operated by a Venezuelan drug cartel. What more do we know?
Yeah, unfortunately, Gabe, all we really know is what we heard from, or what we saw in a tweet from Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Marco Rubio, who said that the U.S. military conducted what he called a lethal strike on a drug boat that was leaving Venezuela. Now, we know that the U.S. Navy has just in recent days sent a number of military ships to not too far from Venezuela, sort of to those area, that region. But at this point, we have no indication that it was actually the U.S. Navy that conducted this strike. We are still scrambling to try to figure out exactly what happened here. It's pretty unusual for the president to make an announcement like that in the Oval Office and then the U.S. military not to be able to really back it up with any kind of details. But frankly, that's just where we are right now.
Courtney, Kube, yeah, that definitely did raise some eyebrows in the Oval Office. And over the last couple of days, Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro has been ramping up his defenses, moving troops in that country in preparation for what he believes could be a U.S. strike. Of course, we have no indication that that has happened, but certainly some unusual goings-on in the Southern Caribbean. Courtney, Kube, Peter Alexander, and Ryan Reilly here. Thank you all so much for this discussion.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.